Welcome to Real Shame. It's a twice, sometimes more show where we review movies from our movie list of shame or movie blind spots. I'm Adam.
I'm Andy.
He's Andy. I don't know why I say that sometimes, but I do. All right. So we're coming at you this week with two monster, maybe kaiju kind of movies, I think. Sure. You can call them that.
Big monsters.
We're going to dive into some classics, but before we get into that, we always like to talk about what we've been watching. So I'm going to toss it over to you, Andy. What have you been watching this week?
All right, so I watched the miniseries that's on Hulu. It's been on Hulu for a few years now, but I finally got around to watching it. 11/22/63.
Oh, that's the one about this is Stephen King going back to the Kennedy assassination.
James Franco is going to go back and prevent Oswald from, or is it Oswald, from basically prevent Kennedy from getting killed. I liked it. I thought it was good. I thought it was entertaining. It's only 8 episodes. Each episode ranges from 45 minutes to an hour. And again, I say it's only 8 episodes because I'm thinking of a lot of Netflix shows which go on for 13 episodes when they probably should only go on for 7 or 8. So I thought it does have some filler in there because I've read a lot of Stephen King novels in my lifetime. I've not read 11/22/63, but if they took a lot of what he put in the novel, I know he has a tendency to kind of go on some lengthy tangents sometimes. So there's definitely some stuff in there that they probably could have trimmed. But I thought overall it's pretty entertaining. I liked it. I watched an Amazon original, a Prime original movie on Amazon. Yeah, how did I find that one? Blu-ray.com is usually where I see reviews because otherwise I wouldn't know because you get on Amazon, they don't promote their stuff really well. It's called Radioactive. It's about Marie Curie and her husband. Marie Curie is played by Rosamund Pike, who I like. She's good in this, but overall I didn't really care for the movie that much. I would not really recommend it other than her performance, which I thought was good. I watched another Netflix original movie that I think has been out for a year or two now called The Perfection. And the only reason I watched it is because I heard it's like batshit crazy.
I think that's the one that follows two ladies, right? And
yeah, they're like, they're cellists.
Yeah, I remember the trailer for this movie, but I don't know anything about it.
I hadn't seen a trailer or anything like that. I just heard it was crazy. Like it was a nutty movie. And I will say it was crazy, but it was crazy bad. It was not like... They definitely go out of their way to make you second guess what's happening in the movie, and then they do some backtracking, and there's some, this is what really happened or whatever, but it's all completely implausible. I mean, maybe it's worth watching if you just want a crazy movie, but I didn't really like it. I thought it was just weird and not good.
I've heard it's grotesque, like there's...
It does have some gross. It definitely has some gross stuff in it, but
that's what I've heard about it.
So. Nothing too disturbing for this guy.
Who has 2 thumbs and doesn't get disturbed.
I've seen some gross stuff.
I've seen Sweet Movie.
I've seen Sweet.
He has not.
In trouble every day. And then finally, I watched the new Little Women, the new Greta Gerwig Little Women movie.
It's on my list.
Hey, all right. But I liked it. I actually enjoyed it. I just saw what you wrote, so that's why I was like. We'll see what he thinks. No, I liked it. I mean, it definitely has a modern sensibility to it, but I don't think that's a bad thing because I think a lot of people don't want to watch these movies that are adapted from these older books or much less read the older books because they're like, I can't relate to it. And I feel like you can relate to these characters. People in the 1800s, no, they didn't have all the technology and some of the things that we have nowadays, but they were still people just like us. They had the same thoughts and feelings. And that's true for, people throughout history, not necessarily just only the people in the 1800s feel like us. But I feel like it's kind of relatable. And I think I just was in a good mood when I watched it. And I liked, because there's a lot of outdoor scenery in the movie. And since we're shut in a lot these days, it made me long to go outside and go walk in a field or go walk. I mean, not that I can't do those things, even with COVID-19 raging around us, but I don't. I'm still hunkered down, in my house or whatever. I thought the performances were all pretty good. The girls, have a good time laughing and being sisters or whatnot. And Bob Odenkirk's in it briefly.
Yeah.
Laura Dern.
He seemed weird as the father character. Even though he's in it for a couple seconds, it's just his face just didn't seem to fit the tone of the movie for me. Maybe because I'm used to seeing him like in comedies and stuff. I don't know.
Well, I've never read the book, and the only other adaptation that I've seen was the '90s one that has Winona Ryder.
And that was going to be my question to you about it: is have you seen the other movies?
Just that one, and I honestly don't even remember how it was. So, but that's what I've been watching.
So and I'll jump on Little Women a little bit. So Kirby and I watched that. I haven't seen anything about the Little Women, but I heard a lot. I think it was Greta Gerwig who. Was it Greta Gerwig who did
directed
it and all that kind of stuff and wrote it and stuff? Yeah. So I heard really good buzz and reviews around it, but I haven't seen any Little Women. I didn't know about the story leading into it. So I actually kind of found it, like I found the time shifts very jarring, and I found the whole movie just kind of confusing. I feel like, and I think I'm in the minority critics-wise for this opinion, but I feel like when she jumps time, there's no theme that kind of carries through for the time jumps, right? So like, let's say let's just do it for instance. Let's say like you're seeing two characters break up, right? And they're in the middle of a fight. Maybe it's their last fight. And then you jump back in time and you show them beating together. And you can see like those parallels and stuff like that. But I felt like every time they did those time jumps, it was arbitrary. It didn't feel like they were doing it on a tone or doing it to cast something in a new light to me and all that kind of stuff. So, and I don't know if a lot of people have that feeling with that movie, but that's what made it feel so jarring to me.
I actually 100% agree with you on that. I found that also jarring. I think I just kind of adjusted to it more, but I questioned why they did it so much. And I questioned, like you, how they were related. And there were times where they would be in the past, they would jump forward to the future for like 20 seconds and then back to the past. And I was like, they didn't even need to do that. There was nothing, again, that related back to the past, even for this 20 seconds that they showed. So why'd they even do it? So I do agree with that, what you're saying about that, for sure. And I don't know, I just enjoyed the rest of it.
And I know Kirby's a fan of the 90s one, so I'm curious to watch that. And I will say, I think it's a good movie. It just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
So I would actually be open to watching Little Women again, knowing everything about it now and seeing if it works more for me. Because I do think it's a well-done movie. It just didn't really work for me.
Yeah.
There were sometimes I didn't even know they jumped back. I go, wait, is this in the future or the past?
Yeah.
Like, I had a hard time, like, obviously
it's confusing.
The haircut for Joe was kind of a indicator. But then it like went away, and I was like, "Wait, I know they're jumping, but like, when is now?"
And I don't know if that's in the book, but I felt like they did that to lead audience or to take audiences by the hand and be like, "Okay, this is where we're at now, and this is where we're at." You know, when she has the long hair, it's this time. When she has short hair, it's this time.
So and the Timothy guy, he looks like he's 12 years old.
Timothy Chalamet.
Yeah.
He looks young.
So I will say, and I said this last week, Patrick H. Willems, he was part of the reason why I watched it. He did a pretty good very good breakdown of Little Women. And, you know, he really enjoyed the movie. And he kind of points out that, and this is not something I saw in watching it, but maybe subconsciously, the color temperatures change between the past and the present. So all the present stuff's kind of bluish and all the past stuff is kind of orangey, rose colored. So I would suggest anyone that's curious about it or that's seen it to check out his kind of film essay on it, because I think it's pretty well done. And talking about Patrick H. Willems, I've been watching a lot of YouTube film essays just to kind of, get in the flow and kind of expand my critical horizons a little bit. And another one that I fell on that I really like is Maggie Mae Fish. She's done some really good film essays. So if you're curious about that subject on YouTube, I definitely recommend checking out her stuff. On the movies I watched besides Little Woman. So continuing Kirby's 90s, I'm putting 90s in air quotes, action movies that she hasn't seen. I showed her Predator because she hasn't seen that. And the reason why I do 90s air quotes is because it actually came out in the late 80s.
Yeah.
And Predator is awesome, Kirby. One word.
Amazing.
It's amazing.
Amazing. I mean, any movie where they do something really violent and I'm jumping up and down going, yes!
You'd never seen Predator this
I'd
first time.
Never seen Predator.
I envy you. I wish I could see that for the first time
it was
again.
amazing.
Like seeing it all over for the first time.
I would just go, oh my God! And I'd be like
Predator.
shaking him, like, did you see that? He's like, yeah, I've seen it before.
Predator's awesome.
Seen it a lot, yeah.
We followed up Predator with its sequel, Predator 2. I saw Predator 2. I've seen it once before this.
Oh, really?
And you know what? It's actually a pretty fun movie. It's a pretty fun action movie. I think it's super gory, super violent. It's like very dystopian in the way it kind of shows society when the predator comes in. But I think it's pretty cool, pretty fun. I think the hardest part I had with this movie was Danny Glover as like a young badass. Like, because this came out
about young, but
this came out after Lethal Weapon, where he's too old for this shit. Yeah. His words. But in this movie, he's like tumbling around and like getting to fisticuffs with Predator. I'm like, I don't believe that he could do that. Like, felt he felt a little too old to do that to me. In addition, yep.
And Gary Busey's in it.
Yes.
Gary Busey's Can't go wrong with that. You got to mention him.
Kirby was so happy when she saw his name.
Yes. And I also just loved the set where like it opened up to like the guy's lair, and it was like you're right there in his bedroom.
Yeah.
Like, massive, huge doors, but nope,
like he had like an Aztec themed like
boudoir.
Boudoir. That was like the what's the top part of a building? I can't even think of it right now.
Like a penthouse.
Penthouse, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm talking about.
It was like you opened up and you were right there in his Aztec fantasy, and Predator just tears that up.
Yeah. The last thing I saw, which is not necessarily a movie, is like Andy said, with a lot of this, with the pandemic going on, a lot of people are putting out table reads and putting out reunion shows and stuff like that. So I watched the Scott Pilgrim versus the World reunion table read, and I've seen a lot of those reunion shows and those table reads. But I gotta say, the Scott Pilgrim versus the World one is the best one I've seen. It is the most fun. You can tell all the people there are enjoying it and having a great time. And it's just a bunch of, nice people having fun and getting together and, saying lines of dialogue from Scott Pilgrim. So if you're a fan of the movie, or if you're even kind of like the movie, I definitely recommend it, because I think it's the best of these kind of reunion table reads that have come out during the pandemic. And that's kind of what I've been watching.
So I actually sat down to write like a little synopsis that I could talk about with King Kong, but I had so many notes already for this movie that I was like, you know what? Everybody knows the story of King Kong. I think a lot of people have seen, and by the way, that's the movie we're doing today. It's King Kong from 1933, the original version. I think everybody has seen, or a lot of people have seen anyway, the most recent version of King Kong, the Peter Jackson one from 2005. Perhaps you've seen the 1976 version with Jeff Bridges and Jessica Lange, but not a lot of people have seen the one that started it all, the original 1933 King Kong. But just in case, a quick recap of the story, because they're all virtually the same. You've got Carl Denham, who is a filmmaker. He shoots them moving pictures. He wants to visit the mysterious Skull Island to get footage of this legendary, godlike almost creature, this giant ape-like thing, a gorilla, maybe a gorilla-like at the very least, King Kong. So he enlists an actress played by, well, in this movie, Fay Wray, but her name is Ann Darrow. He's going to, at first, basically just get footage of Kong with Ann Darrow. He brings along, obviously, a lot of people aboard the ship to help out. Among them, Jack Driscoll, who's kind of the, first mate or something like that. They all get aboard, or they all get onto Skull Island. They do find Kong, and boy, are they sorry. But Kong becomes infatuated with Anne, and Carl hits upon the bright idea, hey, I'm going to take King Kong back to New York City. And I'm going to make millions off of public appearances of the eighth wonder of the world, the giant King Kong. He takes him back to New York City, and doesn't end so well for either New York City's architecture or King Kong. But you already knew that because you've, at the very least, heard the story of King Kong if you haven't seen any of the different movie incarnations. King Kong's directed or co-directed by two guys, Marion Caldwell Cooper and Ernest Beaumont Schoedsack. These are two guys.
Great name.
I won't say their full names, but except that one time. But came out in 1933. These are two guys that got their start making documentary films. So they were and their documentary films were always about kind of nature and man against nature and stuff like that. They made one called Grass. They made one called Chang, a Saga of an Empire, or something like that. Rango. I've seen a couple of them, but it's been years. But they finally hit upon the idea, you know what, we should make, because when they made their documentaries, they sometimes stage things, as people do in documentaries. So they hit upon the idea, you know what, we should make an actual fiction film that's all fiction. We'll still kind of use our knowledge of nature, and because both guys were world travelers. Marion Cooper, in particular, was a complete badass. He served in both World War I, World War II. He was shot down. He was a POW for a time. Both he and Ernest Schoedsack kind of sailed the world as journalists. They took pictures for magazines. They were photographers. I mean, these guys went all over. So they were not afraid to mix it up with King Kong or anybody like that. So first they made a film called The Most Dangerous Game, which I think we've maybe mentioned once or twice on the show. And The Most Dangerous Game is they're basically hunting man on that. But the sets that were used for King Kong, the jungle, were also used for The Most Dangerous Game, which came out a year prior to King Kong. But it's released in 1933. It was a big hit. Again, Fay Wray was Ann Darrow. A guy named Robert Armstrong played Carl Denham. Both he and Fay Wray had appeared in The Most Dangerous Game right before this. And then the final kind of main character, other than Kong, that is a guy named Bruce Cabot. He's plays Jack Driscoll, and he was pretty much an unknown. I think he was like a bouncer or something like that. They discovered. Not a professional actor, and it shows. I think. But before we get any further, that's kind of the production of King Kong and how they got the idea and where they went from there. What did you? Well, first of all, have you seen? I know you've seen the Peter Jackson King Kong.
Yes. I don't remember anything about the Peter Jackson.
You don't remember anything about the Peter Jackson one, and you've not seen the Jeff Bridges one from 1976. I've not seen that. And obviously, you've never seen the 1933 one.
Nope.
What did you think about the original King Kong?
So I wrote, "Is Kong king?" And the answer is, fuck yes. This movie kicks ass. This movie is awesome. Like, there is no reason not to watch this movie. This movie is great. Yep. This movie is awesome. It's wonderful. I thought it was so cool. Yeah. There's some aspects to it that feel dated nowadays watching it and stuff like that. And, whenever it would show a close-up of Kong's face, that was a little comedic at times.
Oh, yeah, I was laughing a lot during that, yeah.
But other than that, I mean, this is awesome. I've seen Kong Skull Island. I mean, this movie's violent. Like, Kong just dispatches animals galore in this movie. He doesn't give a fuck. I guess I'm going to put an expletive tag on this one. But he doesn't care. He just take it out. Things left or right. Stomping on fools and all that kind of stuff. So
eating them, putting them in his mouth.
Eating them. The guy, it was awesome. Yeah. It was very cool. The thing I knew most about this movie was the New York stuff. I think that's the stuff that kind of stuck in my mind. And I do kind of remember them going to the island and stuff, but I always thought, in my memory that was a shorter part of the film and it wasn't as big as it is. Because this kind of, him in New York is almost kind of a coda to me. It feels like a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty quick, actually.
It's really quick. It's at the end. It's not really part of the I guess it is part of the larger story, but it's not really part of the island stuff, which takes up probably like 90% of the movie and stuff.
Absolutely.
But it is awesome. I am upset I haven't seen it before. I did myself a disservice. This movie is great.
Well, I know you and I have talked before, both on the show and not on the show, about how we really like practical effects. Yeah. CGI is great and all that stuff, and obviously it makes things a lot easier to do, and you can do really crazy things with CGI. I'm not knocking it. But it's cool to watch movies like this that are old, where they didn't have the luxury of using computers. They didn't have the luxury of using any kind of computer-generated imagery or anything like that. So everything is done. There's a lot of stop motion in this. There's matte paintings. There's miniatures. There's all kinds of stuff. that's kind of stuff had been used, some of it at least had been used before in the 20s. There's actually a movie called The Lost World from 1925, which is based on a Sir Arthur Conan Doyle book or story. And the same guy that works on that, Willis O'Brien, actually did the effects for King Kong. And they were like inventing stuff and just kind of making it up as they went along. And it just all works. Like you said, yes, there's parts where you kind of laugh or giggle because he looks kind of funny or whatever. But to me, I'm not laughing necessarily and saying it's bad or it's a bad movie. It's just kind of, just makes you chuckle and funny.
Silly.
But it's still awesome. Yeah. Like, it's still awesome. It doesn't matter. The movie, I mean, the first, I don't know, what would you say, 30 minutes or so maybe takes up kind of them getting to before you see Kong. Anyway. I'm not sure exactly how much time elapses. And as I mentioned, like with the guy that plays Jack Driscoll, some of the acting is a little wooden, but I don't, in your words, I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I'm so excited once King Kong comes onto the screen, and for the rest of that time when they're on the island and he's just wreaking havoc, and you've got, so I wrote it down, he wrote, they fight, not necessarily Kong fights all these things, but they encounter a Stegosaurus, a Brontosaurus, a Lasmosaurus, that's the little snake-like thing with like the little legs that he kind of fights in the layer where Fay Ray's up here and
the thing like climbs up the rope to get him.
Yeah.
And apparently there's a cut scene.
Yes.
But we'll get into that.
He fights a T-Rex, obviously.
Yep.
And then
the T-Rex goes like this.
Yeah, and then a pteranodon. When I was watching the movie, I was like a pterodactyl, but according to what I read, it's a pteranodon. But they're very closely related. It's a flying dinosaur, flying bird.
Dinosaur creature.
Fay Ray does a lot of screaming in this movie. Yeah. So, I mean, arguably, is she the world's first or movie's first scream queen? I mean, definitely there were horror movies before this, but I'd say she's badass. Like she and I would be shrieking just like her if Kong was on my tail. I'd be running like hell. The movie has an overture to start.
It does. It was not what I was used to. So it felt, I wasn't ready for it, so it felt kind of uncomfortable because I was waiting for the movie to start, and it was just kind of like, building, and I'm like, okay, the movie's gonna start. Nope, now the movie's gonna start. You know what I mean?
I'd forgotten it had one.
Same here.
I was like, I either came in late that day at film school or they didn't show it.
Well, from what I understand, there's some versions that don't have it because I want to say it was added later. I don't know that it was necessarily in the premiere that they showed, but they added it. I want to say later, so you may not have seen it.
And I thought with the overture, sorry to interrupt. No, I thought with the overture, it was not going to. I didn't know it was a talkie. So with the overture, I thought it was going to be like, a silent movie, and they were just playing the music to kind of get you in the mood. And then when they started talking, I was like, whoa, this is a talkie. Yeah. This is one of them talking pictures.
And the musical score is done by a guy named Max Steiner, who did a lot of other movies probably before, and I know after this. And I like the music for it a lot. As far as kind of the island stuff and the special effects, again, that stuff is amazing. I did think also what was funny was when the Brontosaurus is chasing them, the one guy climbs the tree. He's like, I'm gonna be where his head is at, and he's kind of trying to fight him off. I was laughing at that.
And I was like, that's a Vegosaurus, and then the Brontosaurus just like ate him anyway.
Yes, I don't care what you
think. I don't think they cared they didn't care about historic accuracy in that.
They might not have known. I mean, all honesty, I don't know. I don't know when they found out that certain dinosaurs only ate certain things, but all of them wanted human flesh.
Yeah, those animals, those dinosaurs or whatever, those monsters, whatever you want to call them, like they didn't like the people being on their grounds, and they were messing up dudes left and right. And like Kong, like you would think he'd been on the island long enough, he would know these things, but he like walks through like the little cliff on the cave, and all of a sudden that pterodon or whatever came, and he's like surprised. And I'm like, well, you would know these animals will be around, but it's just kind of interesting. I think at the beginning, since we were talking about that to begin with, I do think like that felt long, like him being at the ship talking about the actress backing out, then going to find the actress in the soup line or whatever, or in the half going to the woman's house and taking her diner.
She's grabbing like something like she's going to steal it.
Yeah,
the guy's like, hey, I'm going to get you. Or right. She's like, oh, here's a buck. Now pipe down.
I think nowadays they could compress that and just be like, someone's like, hey, that's not who we hired to get on the ship to be on this movie. He's like, yeah, the other girl backed out. I grabbed this one, from the Apple line, and then boom.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I don't care much about that because it's really just the anticipation. I think no matter what, no matter which version of this movie that you watch, everybody's just kind of waiting for Kong to show up.
Yeah, you want to see like how it's rendered and what it looks like and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, the effects are. I'm going to mention this for the 50th time. The effects are really really cool. This did take a long time to make. So they get back to New York City. Carl Denham takes him back to New York City, and I was laughing because so obviously he breaks free, and in the Peter Jackson version and in this original version he climbs the Empire State Building. In the 1976 version, he climbs the World Trade Center towers, the Twin Towers. And I always like the poster for that because he's got like a foot on both towers. He's got a foot on each tower. But anyway, in this, I was laughing because I felt like he should hang out with the Invisible Man because they both like to derail trains. I was giggling about that. But yeah, I love that he's just so indiscriminate about... I mean, you kind of feel for Kong because, they're just kidnapping him basically and putting him on display or whatever. But at the same time, he's stepping on people. He's eating people. He reaches into the one lady's apartment that he thinks is Fay Ray or thinks is Ann Darrow. And he's like, oh, you're not here. Just drops her. And she just falls down to her death. When they're back on the island, though, you mentioned there was some stuff that, first of all, they cut out some stuff. One was he starts to take Ann Darrow's or Fay Ray's clothes off. Yeah. He kind of takes some of her clothes off. And
you see like her dress comes off.
Kind of like sniffs his hand or his fingers and it's kind of like whatever because he's been touching her or whatever. But one of the more notorious scenes that they did cut when these guys are going across a log, Kong's like, oh, no, you didn't. And so he starts shaking the log. They all fall down into a pit and then are eaten by like giant spiders and giant insects from the island and stuff like that, but they cut that part out. So all you see is these guys, and it's just dummies, just kind of falling or whatever to their, I guess, presumably death, since you don't see them actually getting eaten by the giant insects or giant spiders or whatever.
And I found what?
No, because I told Adam about that scene, and I found the closest, there's like a YouTube video that's the closest known. It fills in a little gaps, but it's like 85% of that footage. And
really?
It's so disturbing.
I don't think I've seen it.
It's so disturbing. It shows kind of like it's a combination of, it has a couple of stills, but the giant things come, and it is just so disturbing.
Wow.
And I told him about that because in the Peter Jackson one, I spook during a movie, but rarely does something like scare me later. That bug scene in the Peter Jackson one is so disturbing to me, I will turn it off. And I know he made it to like make up for the fact that he wanted to make it as graphic, and boy does it work. It terrified me. And even when I watched the old one, it terrified me. Oh, it's so scary.
Well, from what I understand, Peter Jackson owns like one of because they had like an armature for Kong in certain scenes where he was I think he owns one of those, something like that.
Like 10 foot or 12 foot, like
So apparently he's a big Kong fan.
And I think some of the interesting things is how they hide the transition between like when Kong's going to pick up Fay Ray, maybe she'll walk behind something and then Kong will pull his hand back and he has a doll in his hand and stuff like that. So I think I like that. There's a lot of like, it's like puzzle solving almost that they were doing when they were making the movie that I find very enjoyable, and kind of watching the movie and the kind of like a meta kind of narrative and stuff like that is really cool.
Yeah, speaking of kind of meta things, they of course they play up the whole it's Beauty and the Beast, and the Beast, and they make a comment in the movie about why is a dame got to be like the one guy Jack Driscoll's so pissed that a girl is on board the ship. He's like, oh, why do you got to have a dame or whatever? But Carl Denham explains that moving pictures they want the love angle, they want the romance or whatever, which I thought was kind of funny, and I think that was kind of a thing in real life. They wanted to make King Kong just a rampaging ape that was killing all these people, and they didn't necessarily have the Fay Ray character in mind or the Ann Darrow character in mind. And the studio was like, no, you need to put in some kind of female interest or whatever, and that all kind of came together the way that we know it today.
That's cool. Yeah. It seems like they did, like judging from what you said about their backstory and stuff, it seems like they pulled a lot from their history and kind of making Kong, which I think made it more real and stuff like that and made it really cool.
Yeah, I wanted to point out a couple of things. So on the island, on Skull Island, there's a little boy who's about to get trampled by Kong, and a lady comes and grabs him and runs away with him. That lady is Etta McDaniel. She is the sister of Hattie McDaniel, who won an Academy Award for Gone with the Wind. I didn't know that.
I didn't know that either.
Read that in the trivia.
Oh, wow.
And also, Marion Cooper and Ernest Schoedsack are the two guys on the plane that finally kills Kong, that shoots him down. One of them's the gunner, and one of them's the pilot. And from what I read, they both were pilots in real life. Not that they were flying a plane actually in the movie and going at Kong, but they actually were. Like I say, they both served in wartime. They both were complete badasses.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And speaking of Gone with the Wind, Hattie McDaniels was in Gone with the Wind. Her sister's in this movie. The wall that is used and the door, the gate, were burned 6 years later for the burning of Atlanta scene, also in Gone with the Wind. They used some of that footage that they burned. Yeah.
Oh.
Back in those days, they like let stuff deteriorate, and they're like, we don't need these old movies. Let's just toss them out.
Yeah.
They didn't make backups or anything like that. So yeah.
It was interesting just watching it again because of just how sexualized some things are.
Yeah.
Like how, the costume choices and how sheer some things are.
Yeah. Well,
for the time, it's like, what?
It is another example of a pre-code Hollywood movie because it came out in 1933, and that wasn't starting to be enforced until 1934. So they, I think, could probably get away with a little bit more stuff, except for giant spiders eating people.
I guess nipples are okay, but giant spiders, nope.
Yeah.
And that goes for movies nowadays too, I guess.
Yeah. So, show and tell time. Oh. I've got my little tin, if you can see it here. There we go. I'll just put it in front of my face. I've actually had this. I bought this at Goodwill for like $1 or something a long time ago. It's just a French little tin one-sheet kind of poster of King Kong. I think the light's hitting. Hey, there we go. Perfect. Of King Kong. No real reason to bring that along. I thought of it, and I actually dug in a closet for this.
Right.
I haven't seen it in years. I found it. It's King Kong, the eighth wonder of the world.
So, you mentioned there's other versions of King Kong. Have you seen the Peter Jackson in the 70s one?
I've seen them both. The Peter Jackson one, I don't remember. I remember not liking it overall, and it's very long. It's 3 hours long. I remember liking some stuff in it a lot. I thought there was some really good stuff in it, but overall, I thought it was not that great. I have a soft spot. I mean, I think the 33 version is the best. Don't get me wrong. But I have a soft spot for the 1976 version because that's another one of those movies that it played on TV a lot when I was a kid. I think we had it on VHS, or we had at least like a recorded copy of it. And this, honestly, this is going to sound kind of funny, but when I was a kid, I'm not kidding here. When I was a kid, I used to see Jeff Bridges in that movie. He has long hair and a beard, and I thought he looked really cool. And I was like, when I get older, someday I'm going to have long hair and a beard. And I made it.
He's cool.
Although now it's all going gray, but still, I made it. I made it, Jeff. I'm like you.
Dad? Papa?
Daddy? But no, and I like the fact that they mixed it up. They have him climb the World Trade Center in that movie as opposed to, it's still in New York, obviously, but they have him climb the World Trade Center, which were they were very new at the time. They were only about 5-6 years old, something like that. So I thought that was cool. But yeah.
Are the World Trade Center taller than the other buildings? And that's probably why.
I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, that is why. So the Empire State Building was the tallest building in the world forever. And then, actually, I'm sorry. The World Trade Center was the tallest building right after the Empire State Building. But by the time King Kong in 76 came out, it had been surpassed by the Sears Tower. So technically, if he was going to climb the tallest building, they should have went to Chicago, and he could have climbed. And now it's known as Willis Tower, but I think all Chicagoans, which I'm not a Chicagoan, so I guess I can't call it Willis Tower, but all Chicago natives call it still Sears Tower. Yeah. But that was technically the tallest building at that time in 1976.
And then in the 2000s, we had Tom Cruise climb the tallest building in the world, which was the Burj Khalifa.
That's true. That's true.
So I watched Peter Jackson the same night. Adam went to bed, and then I'm like a night owl, and so I watched the Peter Jackson one.
The 3-hour-long one.
Yes, I
wow.
did. I mean, I gotta say, I mean, obviously, there were some plot devices for that one that I liked. I liked that Jack Driscoll was the writer for the Peter Jackson. It made so much more sense, and so he kind of and it's also funny because then when they're shooting the scenes on the boat, the dad from Friday Night Lights, can't remember his name, he is playing
Kyle Chandler.
Yeah, so they are saying the dialogue that they actually said like the scene between in the 1933 Jack and Anne. That's the scene they shoot on the boat. So it's kind of funny, just that like you see it repurposed.
Oh yeah.
And then when they're trying to find the actress, they're like, "What about Faye?" And Jack Black goes, "Oh no, he's doing something with Cooper." So I just kind of appreciated the like kind
The
of
callback.
little callbacks to that. It was just kind of cool to be like, "Oh, cool."
Yeah, and I mean, I don't remember liking the Peter Jackson one all that much, but if there's anybody I think that you want doing it, because he's obviously a big fan, if there's anybody you want remaking it, I think Peter Jackson was probably the right guy to do it. And Andy Serkis as King Kong. Andy Serkis is amazing in any kind of CGI kind of motion capture role that he does.
And you'd go on to perfect those skills in the Planet of the Apes remakes, which are amazing.
I also think too, like with rear projection, that one little thing. I feel like this revolutionized rear projection. I mean, because they were able to do the projection with the live actors and not affect the lighting, and that is so cool.
Yeah.
The coolest freaking thing ever. Yeah. So I just little nerd film.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think any of us can stress this enough. If you like practical effects, CGI's fine, but if you like practical effects, if you like this sort of thing, you owe it to yourself to see a movie like King Kong because they were so revolutionary in what they did, and it still looks great. I mean, it looks cool.
I would say if you like any of these kind of monster movies, whether you're watching the new, Kong Skull Island or Godzilla King of the Monsters, or if you're watching the the Jaeger movies, the Pacific Rim movies and stuff like that. If you like these kind of big monster movies and you haven't seen King Kong 1933, you will get enjoyment out of it, even though it's, dated a bit and it's black and white. It is an awesome movie. It's so fun. It's well worth your time.
Absolutely.
Andy, what do you think about the fact that it's ranked on AFI's list in the 40s? I think that is...
Of the 100 greatest movies?
Yes, that's sad. I didn't realize that. I looked that up.
I mean, I just, from you saying that, I think I'd have to disagree. I'm curious as to what the other ones are, like the ones that came before it. I'd be interested. I know I've looked at that list, but I don't remember.
There were, I was like, I saw it was like, like 46 or 43 or something on 100 Greatest Films. I was like, what? And what is before it? You're just going, nope. I don't know, just because we'd watched it that night, but I was like, this should be higher. This is top 10 material. Like I was.
Yeah. Well, I saw it a long time ago, and I've actually rewatched this movie within the last 3 or 4 years. So it's a movie that I will sit down and watch gladly. I don't need to watch it for any particular reason. I just think it's a badass movie. Mm-hmm. It's cool. Sure. So mentioned it was released it got a wide release in the spring of 1933. It was followed the very same year in December of 1933 by a sequel called Son of Kong, which I have seen as well, but honestly, I've only seen it once and I don't remember much about it. So I don't remember if it's bad or good. The only other time I can think of, I know sometimes they shoot sequels back to back, but they're typically not released in the same year. The only other example that came to mind of a movie and its sequel that came out the same year are those classic films Break-In and Break-In 2, Electric Boogaloo. I believe those came out the same year.
I think
because Break-In was such a huge hit.
I think the last Harry Potter movies, when they broke book 7 and 2,
part 1 and 2.
I think we're 6 months apart, but I do think they're not on the same calendar year.
Okay. And then this was the first movie. So Criterion put this out on Laserdisc. This is actually the first movie to have an audio commentary for it.
Oh, that's cool.
Way back in the day, yeah. There was King Kong films. So there was King Kong, then there was Son of Kong. They made some King Kong films in Japan, both with and without Godzilla, who we're going to talk about pretty soon.
Oh, no. Spoilers.
We mentioned it was remade, obviously, in 1976. A movie that I hadn't thought about in a while. So the remake came out in 1976, and then there's an Italian movie with Gerard Depardieu called Goodbye Monkey or Bye Bye Monkey. I'm not kidding. So in the 76 version, he falls from the World Trade Center. Well, at that time, New York, now it's Battery Park City, but at the time it was basically kind of a beach in that area next to the Hudson River. Yeah. And in this movie, Goodbye Monkey, which I saw way back when, he finds Gerard Depardieu finds the corpse of King Kong. But there's a baby gorilla there, and so he adopts the baby gorilla and takes it around the rest of the movie. It's very abstract and weird, but I thought I had to point that out. It's a very strange movie. This inspired a lot of different kind of knockoff ape movies. There is a movie called Ape in 3D with the mom from Growing Pains, Joanna Kearns. Yeah, The Mighty Peking Man, which is a
Yes, I'm glad you
hilarious
brought this up.
movie. I actually watched a movie that was kind of a knockoff of this, another Italian film called Yeti. It's technically a Yeti monster, but he's huge and almost looks like King Kong type thing. Yeti giant of the 20th century. As you mentioned, they made the Kong Skull Island in recent years. There's a King Kong Lives, which was a sequel to the 76 one with Sarah Connor herself, Linda Hamilton, in the 1980s. Kong would make an appearance, or a Kong-like figure would make an appearance in the video game Rampage, which also has a lizard-like creature, although I thought it was maybe inspired by Godzilla, but apparently it's not, from what I understand.
Lizzie the Lizard?
Lizzie the Lizard, yeah. It was inspired by a movie called 20 Million Miles to Earth. But anyway, get off subject. Marion Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack would continue to make movies after King Kong. They were, producers, and they would co-direct and direct some things, by themselves or whatever. 16 years after King Kong, they would kind of revisit a giant ape kind of formula with the movie Mighty Joe Young, which a lot of people are probably familiar with. The remake, which came out in the 90s with Charlize Theron, but the original version came out in 1949. It's also pretty fun. Not nearly as good as King Kong, but I'd say worth a look. King Kong itself is 98% fresh, 86% audience score. It's too low. It needs to be in the 90s.
Yep.
Ebert and Malton both give it 4 stars, and both obviously think, like we do, that it is a classic film and everybody should see it, whether or not you've seen the other King Kongs or not.
Siskel couldn't be bothered to review it.
The Ebert one obviously was just in print. Siskel might have a print one, but I just can't find a good resource online for his print. Like Roger Ebert has rogerebert.com, and you can easily type in a movie, and bam, there it is. Siskel, there is a genesiskel.com, I think, but it doesn't really have his reviews archived. So there's probably one out there. I'm just not a good enough Googler to find it. And
let us
also,
know.
if it's not on, let us know. If it's not on their show, like a clip upload to YouTube or something, I might miss it. Okay, so to pair with King Kong, because King Kong, the 8th wonder of the world, it's hard to compete with that. He's awesome, but we thought of another giant monster movie. And, I mean, when you think of giant monsters, you can't help but think also of Godzilla.
Gojira.
Straight out of Japan, but we will be talking about the Roland Emmerich late 90s, 1998 version, starring Matthew Broderick and a bunch of people who were voices on The Simpsons. We'll be talking about that on the next episode, so stay tuned for that.
Yep. All right. And also in those Wednesday episodes, we answer viewer questions. So if you have a question, shoot us an email, realshame@gmail.com. Follow us on social media @realshame on Instagram. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff, because it actually does help spread the word, and we really do appreciate that. And stay tuned next time as we dive into Roland Emmerich's Godzilla. We'll see you next time, guys.